Hey guys, today we're going to really talk about the Renaissance. So, during the Middle Ages, the development and the rise of feudalism had put much of Europe into what was largely a subsistence economy in which trade centered more around local fairs than international markets. But beginning in the 11th century, however, trade began to revive due to a number of factors like improved agricultural techniques, which led to an increase in crop production, rise in population, which contributed to the development of towns and cities, and the emergence of new trade routes in the wake of the Crusades. Or the Crusades, lots of people going from place to place, not just to attack, but also to move goods and supplies. Improvement in transportation, especially shipbuilding, and the emergence of currency-based economy, such as opposed to bartering. So rather than I'm going to trade this hammer for a chicken, you'd actually have money, okay, to give to someone. Because of this, there was a shift to economy-based system that led to a class of bankers, a class of merchants, tradespeople, and artisans that rose up in these new cities and towns. Now, let's talk about the politics, the political side of it. The Renaissance originated in the city-states of northern Italy. And Italy hadn't developed a strong central government during the late Middle Ages. Instead, it was made up of about 250 small states, or city-states as they were known. Instead of these large places, they had what they would call communes. They were associations of local merchants and merchant guilds that took care of the cities and the services such as building city walls, keeping city order, making sure the city stayed clean. So many of the nobles chose to move into these growing cities, drawn by the economic and political opportunities available. The merchants and the nobles, we're back. All right. Yes, I can. I can blame everything on Thomas. So, the merchants and the nobles in the cities began to merge in many different ways. Some were economic partnerships and political allies, and then some were marriages. They would have their children marry another family who had an economic tie and then a political tie. And this created what they called the urban elite, this new group. The communes thus represented both a break from the feudal system and the creation of a new economic hierarchy. So politics in the commune were very chaotic, often extremely violent. Citizenship in the commune was initially based on holding property, which meant that many artisans and lesser merchants were excluded from political power. They also suffered under the burden of heavy taxation. It was known as the popolo, which means the people. They pushed for political change. In many Italian cities, they eventually managed to get Republican representatives or governments established. In some cases, though, they had to force of arms. Many of these popular governments, however, failed either because the leadership didn't extend political power to the groups that put them in office, or because they couldn't maintain civil order. Remember, there's no major government that could control the armies. They were all small groups led by merchants or very wealthy families. So they ultimately ended up in what they call dictatorships, or we've talked about these oligarchies, where is a rule by one small power, one small family. And although most retained the trappings or outward appearance of republican governments, they still were pretty much just governed by families. So in several city-states, mercenary soldiers known as condottieri provided defense and kept order. So because they were based on an economy, what better way to have soldiers than to pay for them? Okay, let's talk about these city-states for a little bit. If you look at the different colors, go ahead. You'll notice that the Italian city-states not only suffered from internal conflict, but also they came in conflict with one another in several different ways. They vied with each other for economically struggling for control of commercial trade routes, control of natural resources, access to seaports. What is it, Thomas? Thank you, Thomas. They fought over territory when one city-state sought to expand into another's domain. They went to war with one another when one city-state seemed to become too powerful. They also competed socially with each other, trying to outdo the other in terms of opulence, sophistication, artistic achievements. And throughout the 15th century, Italian city-states conducted a complex foreign policy market that foreign policy that was marked by constantly shifting alliances, diplomatic intrigue, and establishment of embassies and ambassadors to maintain and manage delicate political relationships. So imagine all of these different places, each one having its own ambassador, each one trying to communicate with the other state about stuff. The 5 most important city-states were Florence, Venice, Papal States, Milan, and Naples. So write those down. Those you will need to know. All right, Milan. It was located in northern Italy. Milan became one of the richest and most powerful of the Italian city-states due to mostly because of the fact that it lay in the junction of several important trade routes. Its rulers also established an effective tax system that helped the city to remain very prosperous. And in the 14th century, Milan came under the rule of the Visconti family, who became the city-state's first ruling dynasty. In early 1300s, the Viscontis embarked upon a quest for territorial expansion, using a variety of means, mostly peaceful, a whole bunch of spending money and negotiating people to surrender their lands, but still, they began to come to an impasse with northwest Italy, and they came close to conquering Florence in the early 1400s, but all in all, they still got stopped along the way. Now, this family right here, you can tell by the chin they were important, okay? See that little chin? See the double part? Yeah, that means they had money. Okay? People were very impressed with that. You had 2 chins, that meant you were wealthy. Okay? So in the mid-15th century, the last of the Visconti rulers died without leaving an heir. Milan briefly established a republic, hired a group of condottieri, remember they were soldiers, led by a man named Francesco Sforza. He worked with Viscontis before, providing defense for Milan on several earlier occasions. This time, however, he used the opportunity to attack the city and seize the power. The Sforzas would become Milan's ruling dynasty for almost a century. Francesco Sforza's takeover prompted Venice to declare war on Milan, so now Venice and Milan are at war. The war saw a shift in traditional alliances between the city-states. Florence, in the past, had a long-standing alliance with Venice. In this conflict, however, Cosimo de' Medici, the Florentine ruler, chose to support Milan. Naples continued to support Venice. The war ended with the Peace of Lodi in 1454, in which Venice agreed to recognize Sforza as Duke of Milan in exchange for some minor territories. The Peace of Lodi also served as an informal non-aggression pact between the 4 main city-states involved in that war, and a period of relative stability ensued that would last for almost 40 years. Francesco Sforza ruled until his death in 1466, and the next great Sforza ruler, Ludovico, sometimes known as Ludovico the Moor, took over in 1480. Though all the Sforzas were great patrons of the arts, Ludovico was the most prominent, making extensive use of his position as one of the wealthiest and most powerful princes in Italy to provide support for some of the most famous artists and architects of the Renaissance. With his wife, Beatrice d'Este, she held a brilliant court and spent immense sums of money to further the arts and sciences. He is remembered especially for his patronage of a man named Leonardo da Vinci and the architect Donato Bramante. And after helping Charles the Eighth, gotta count that up, yeah, 8th of France invade Naples, he was forced out of Milan by King Louis XII in 1499. One of his sons, Francesco II, was restored to basically power in Milan and was the last of the male line of the Sforzas. So that's it for them. We're moving on now to Venice. Now, you've all heard of Venice before. It's very famous. This was the bordering of the Adriatic Sea in the northeastern Italy. It was a major center for trade. That's what you really need to know. Trade center, things coming in and out from all around the world. Due to its geographic location and its special trading privileges, the Venetian merchants were able to secure from the Byzantine and the German emperors. This is in part due to the fact that the Germans, the Byzantines, and the French used Venice a whole lot to trade and made a ton of money off of the the Crusades and the Crusaders coming through. They spent all their money on food and shipping through Venice for the Crusades. In fact, the Fourth Crusade I talked about, Venice actually convinced the Crusaders to attack Constantinople in order to return the money that the Venetians had borrowed from someone else and needed to get back from the Crusaders themselves. If that's not confusing, read on about it some more and you'll see it just goes back and forth. These people were kind of feeding off of each other in order to attack other countries in order to pull money from them. It was the start of the mercantile system, except it hadn't quite taken a hold yet. So, anyway, back to the time of the Renaissance. The city was the main trading crossroads between the East and the West, supplying mostly Italy, Germany, and France with goods from Asia and the Middle East. So you need to know that. Italy, Germany, and France from Asia, Middle East. Venice had begun as a republic in the 6th century CE with an elected ruler called a Doge. The Doge, who was the ruler that oversaw several lesser officials. By the time of the Renaissance, however, the Doge had become little more than just a figurehead. Real political power in the Renaissance Venice lay with the merchants and their oligarchies. So these merchant families had taken over. There's still a Doge to go to, but he didn't rule over a whole lot. So some 200 merchant families dominated Venice's great council, controlled the city government, and as Venice was a crucial seaport, it developed not only a strong merchant fleet, but also a very, very powerful navy at the same time. Venice didn't have a lot of land, and it only really needed to defend its ports from other people. So that's where all their time, effort, and money were going. All right, let's talk about the war between Venice and Genoa. So the Venetian merchants, they really want to protect their merchandise, protect their trade routes. So they were willing to attack any rivals that they had. And when the city-state of Genoa began to encroach on some of their trade routes, take over some of their money, Venice declared war on them. The city-states fought sporadically here and there throughout the 14th century, and Venice finally emerged victorious in 1381. After its defeat, Genoa declined as a major trading power, while Venice went on to become the greatest trading center in Europe in the 15th century. All right, what made Venice so great? Venice began to attempt to expand to the Italian mainland, which brought it into conflict with other Italian city-states, especially Milan, which bordered it to the west. Venice and Milan went to war in 1450. Though neither emerged victorious, Venice did gain some territory, and by the 1500s, Venice controlled a significant portion of northern Italy. Now in the 13th century, Venice had managed to get Frankish soldiers in the Fourth Crusade to attack and conquer Constantinople. Venice subsequently established a commercial colony there and gained control of the trade routes of the Byzantine Empire. So now Venice has begun to control more than just a small area. It's controlling a whole lot of what's going on around the world. Venice used its position in Constantinople to dominate commerce between Europe and Asia up through the middle of the 15th century. So now by 1453, the Ottoman Turks were conquering and destroying Constantinople, and they also destroyed the Venetian colonies there. The Ottomans continued to fight with Venice up through the 16th century, capturing many of the Venetian-controlled and gradually weakened their positions. All right, guys, that's all for today. I'll go ahead and put we just made it through slide 9. We've still got at least 20-something slides or 30 slides to get through. I'll put those through the rest of the week, and I might even post some of these up over Christmas. I know you're not going to watch them, but I'll try to do that anyway.